Hey, Rock Solid Gang. Hey, y'all. So, y'all, the verdict came down in the Ahmaud Arbery case today. I'm sure everybody's already heard Travis and Greg got life without the possibility of parole. And William Bryan, got life with the possibility of parole. So, what are y'all thoughts on that? Y'all hit me in the comments. How y'all feeling about it? Do you think all of them should have got life without parole? Or, do you agree? Do you disagree with the verdict? Man, condolences to the family. I know this is not closure. People say closure, get closure. This is not closure, but, at this point, hopefully the family can start healing, Yep, so the verdict came down, y'all. It went kind of like how I thought it would go. I kind of felt like William Bryan would get life with the possibility of parole because of his part in the murder, even though it doesn't matter. He played a part. But legally speaking, I could just tell, that he would probably get a little bit of leniency. And like the judge said, when I watched the judge handing down the sentencing, he's the only one that showed some type of remorse. Those other two showed no remorse. So, and tried to make excuses. And, they just kept digging deeper and deeper. So, yep. So y'all just let me know what y'all think. How y'all feeling about the verdict?
What we're here today to determine is what an appropriate sentence is, quite separate from the notoriety of the case and any other outside influence that may exist. And so the court is going to be very careful in explaining that the court has considered just the evidence and what is appropriate under the circumstances of this case to consider in the Superior Court. So that all being said, let me start with this statement. As we all now know, based upon the verdict that was rendered in this court in November, Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy on many, many levels. On February 23rd of 2020, almost 2 years ago, a resident of Glynn County, a graduate of Brunswick High, a son, a brother, a young man with dreams, was gunned down in this community. As we understand it, he left his home apparently to go for a run, and he ended up running for his life. He entered the English home at approximately 1:04 p.m. and left that home at about 1:08 on that day. At 1:14, Greg McMichael calls 911 to let them know that there's a black male running down the street. And within moments, Ahmaud Arbery is shot and killed. The three men that are now before this court chased him in a residential neighborhood for at least 5 minutes in pickup trucks, armed with a shotgun and a .357 revolver. The state mentioned this today about the time period, but I do want to put that time period in context. And the only way I could think to do so may be a little theatrical, but I think it's appropriate. I want us all to get a concept of time. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit silently for 1 minute. And that 1 minute represents a fraction of the time that Ahmaud Arbery was running in Satilla Shores. That's approximately a minute. Again, the chase that occurred in Satilla Shores occurred over about a 5-minute period. And when I thought about this, I thought from a lot of different angles, and I kept coming back to the terror that must have been in the mind of the young man running through Satilla Shores. The jury heard the evidence and returned any lawful evidence which tends to show the motive of the defendants, their lack of remorse, their general moral character, and any predisposition to commit other crimes. Now, I think in this case, the record speaks for itself, and the defendant's own words, I think, guide this court with regard to sentencing. Went back through my notes and other resources to pull some of the quotes that we have in this case. I'll start with Greg McMichael. In my opinion, Greg McMichael, very early on in this, tried to establish a narrative. He made comments like, Ahmaud Arbery was trapped like a rat. Stop or I'll blow your, and I won't repeat it again, head off. He effectively admitted that he wasn't sure what Ahmaud Arbery had done wrong. Quote, I don't think the guy has actually stolen anything out there, or if he did, it was early in the process. But he keeps going back over and over again into this damn house. Again, back to the narrative. Told Travis, you have no choice. Told another individual at the scene, this guy ain't no shuffler. This guy's an asshole. Commented that he wanted him, Ahmaud Arbery, to know that we weren't playing. If I could have gotten a shot at the guy, I would have shot him. Travis McMichael claims he was in shock. But it's interesting because he talks about his concern for his child and his own well-being. Part of this was while the victim was actually laying there in the street. Commented, this is the worst day of my life. Well, I think it's been touched on here today. There were other individuals that were impacted. I look at the video of this incident. When I say the video, I think everybody knows what we're talking about, but there was one part of it that struck me as absolutely chilling. And that is, I believe it's in the enhanced video provided by the GBI. There's a frame where I believe Ahmaud Arbery, it looks to be, if he's 20 yards out, that may be close, 30 yards out. And it's the frame of Travis McMichael lifting the shotgun to fire at Ahmaud Arbery. And you watch that with context. And when I say context, after hearing the evidence in this case, again, thinking about a young man that had been running at that point for almost 5 minutes, and it is a chilling, truly disturbing scene. And we got there because Travis McMichael's father saw Ahmaud Arbery hauling down the street and calls out, let's go. At that point, Travis McMichael, despite whatever may have been going on in his life at that time, with regard to family or otherwise, just goes, grabs a shotgun and goes because he assumes that it is the right thing to do. Ahmaud Arbery was then hunted down and shot. And he was killed because individuals here in this courtroom took the law into their own hands. Mr. Bryan, he joined in after calling out to the McMichaels. Y'all got him? Claimed he didn't know what was going on, but obviously wanted to know if this individual who was running through the neighborhood, who he didn't know, had been caught in some way. Said, quote, I figured he'd done something wrong, but I didn't know for sure. All right, that wasn't actually the quote. Those quotes are two separate quotes. Didn't know for sure. I thought he would get away. And this is the part that is disturbing to me with Roddy Bryan. If the guy would have stopped, this would have never happened. All of these quotes give context, I think, to the video that we saw during the case. This morning made a statement that I think, when you look at these statements and you see the videos, is very true. And that is, she said, when they could not scare or intimidate him, they killed him. There's been discussion about remorse. And I agree with counsel that it is dangerous for defendants who have multiple prosecutions against them to make statements of remorse. But remorse isn't something that is simply a statement of regret. Remorse, I think, can be determined by looking at somebody's reaction to difficult circumstances and the reality of the situation that they're in. Again, it doesn't require an apology, and quite honestly, sometimes apologies are made simply to get past problems. Remorse is something that's felt and demonstrated. In this case, getting back to the video, again, after Ahmaud Arbery fell, the McMichaels turned their backs. It's, again, a disturbing image, and they walked away. This was a killing. It was callous, and it occurred, as far as the court is concerned, based upon the evidence, because confrontation was being sought. I think the statement was made during closing arguments. It's interesting to note that the most violent crime in Satilla Shores was the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. That said, with regard to the sentence in this case, as to Travis McMichael, Mr. McMichael, the court sentences you as follows. Count 1, malice murder, life without the possibility of parole. Count 2, felony murder, is vacated by operation of law. Count 3, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 4, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 5, felony murder, vacated by operation of law. Count 6, aggravated assault, merges into count 1. Count 7, aggravated assault. The court sentences the defendant to 20 years consecutive to count 1. Count 8, false imprisonment, merges into count 1. Count 9, attempted false imprisonment, 5 years concurrent to count 7. That is life plus 20. Greg McMichael, the court sentences you as follows. Count 1, malice murder, defendant was found not guilty. Count 2, felony murder, life without the possibility of parole. Count 3, felony murder, vacated. When I say vacated, it's vacated by operation of law in all cases. I'm not going to repeat it. Count 4, vacated. Count 5, vacated. Count 6 merges into count 2. Count 7, aggravated assault, 20 years consecutive to count 2. Count 8, 10 years concurrent to count 7. Count 9, 5 years concurrent to count 7. That is life plus 20 years. Roddy Bryan, I do want to separate a little bit because the state is making a different recommendation. And despite the back and forth that Mr. Goff and I had during this case, I do want to point out a couple things that he raised that I think are appropriate to raise with regard to the sentence. As far as the remorse, I think Roddy Bryan stands in very different shoes. It is obvious from the beginning that he questioned the tragedy that had occurred at the scene and was on, I believe, I can't remember whose body cam, but the body cam, in fact, questioning whether or not what had occurred, and then took steps early on in this process, I think, that demonstrated that he had grave concerns that what had occurred should not have occurred. And I think that does make Mr. Bryan's situation a little bit different. However, Mr. Bryan has been convicted of felony murder. And I do not believe it can be disputed based on the facts of this case that the verdict was an appropriate verdict based upon the evidence presented, at least. And when I say appropriate, what I mean is legal. Because I believe there's been some discussion about some differences between Mr. Bryan and the McMichaels. There may be some differences, but it does not change the fact that was it not for the fact that Mr. Bryan used his vehicle in a way to impede Mr. Arbery's course of travel, this may not have ever occurred, and that is sufficient for felony murder. He did cooperate with law enforcement. I will point out, Mr. Goff, 1710(1)B, there's actually a case out of Chatham County that says it would not apply under the circumstances of this case. So the court, recognizing that Mr. Bryan's position is different, again, Mr. Bryan was found not guilty on count 1 and count 2. The court sentences Mr. Bryan to life with the possibility of parole on count 3. Count 4 is vacated. Count 5 is vacated. Count 6, the defendant was found not guilty. Count 7 merges into count 3. The defendant is sentenced to 10 years consecutive to count 3 on count 8 and 5 years concurrent with count 8. Both of those counts, though, will be suspended sentences, which gives Mr. Bryan a life with the possibility of parole sentence.
We owe a great debt of gratitude to the legal team that stood behind this family. And we want to give an amazing applause and high commendation to our DA, who stood nobly in the shoulders and the shadow of Thurgood Marshall. Would you give Attorney Brody a big hand as he comes to share?
You know, Pastor said some powerful words. For a young African-American male, this day means quite a bit, because it tells me that America can meet its promise. I want to give big-time credit to my legal team, Linda, Paul, Larissa, who's not here. You saw 14 days. You saw 14 days of work in the courtroom. But before that work in the courtroom, there was 18 months of hard preparation and work to make sure that we uncovered the facts, we uncovered the truth, and we're prepared to present the truth so that we could find justice for this family. I have to give credit to Wanda and Marcus. Because they knew the son that they raised. And they knew when they heard the story of what happened that day, and they were determined to find out the truth. And you heard the truth over the 14 days here in this courtroom. You heard the verdict of the jurors. And I have to give credit to those jurors. Because we have to understand here in America that the jurors are the one who represent the community. They're the ones who decide what this community is about. And from day one, when I came here to Brunswick, the community told me that this was not who we were. That the hate, the intolerance, the divisiveness needed to go away. And that juror made sure that that decision was made in the courtroom where it should be made. And so I'm thankful for the jurors. I'm thankful for Judge Walmsley. That man is a man of integrity who today demonstrated how much this case hit every single one of us and the importance of justice in this country. I cannot reiterate enough that it's time we take away the hate. It's time we take away the intolerance and the divisiveness. And if we're going to call ourselves a nation under God, we have to remember God's number two commands. Love God with all your heart. But the second one, and Judge Walmsley alluded to this, is love your neighbor. Your neighbor's not the person next to you all the time, but it's each and every one of us. We are all children of God. And so when you hate one of us, you're telling me you hate God. So let's do this right. Let's take this opportunity to move forward. Send a message to the rest of this country that we are united. We are working together, and we want to do what's right at all times. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the state of Georgia, to represent this community, and to represent this country, and to show that justice will prevail at all times. So thank you.
History is going to record that Brunswick is this generation's Selma. That's right. That the movement is being rebirthed and relaunched right from this sacred soil, and we're excited about it.